For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails, and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
All right, I'd like to call the Metro Council Business Meeting for September 14th, 2023 to order. Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. Councillor Simpson. Present. Councillor Wong.
Present.
Councillor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Buenos dias, good morning. Here.
Good morning. I believe that Councillor Nolan is excused today, and President Peterson.
Here, thank you. Before we begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for our in-person attendees?
Hi, I'm Justin Dunlap, and I'm the department head stagehand electrician at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall. Safety's a big part of my job. From electrical, making sure that I stay up to date on the NFPA codes and regulations, to rigging, where we make sure that everything is safely suspended overhead, to egress, ensuring that our audiences, performers, and technicians have the safest possible route in case of emergency. I'm out here at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, and you're in the Metro Regional Center. Please note that we're on the 3rd floor of the building. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the steps to the 2nd floor and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk. We will meet in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue.
Great. We'll move on to the public communication portion of our meeting. I will now open public communication on non-agenda items. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public communication portion of the meeting?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage the timer to go off of the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now by raising your hand, either on Zoom or in the room. The raise hand button on Zoom, depending on your version, is at the bottom of your screen or within the Reactions tab. So for those on Zoom, in order to allow those testifying to turn on their cameras, I'll be promoting you to a full panelist. So I'll call your name, and then you'll pop over to the panelist side where you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And as a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, councilors, we have had a few folks sign up in advance to testify today. So first up, we have Michael Harrison. So Michael, you can come up and take any of these 4 seats. And your time will begin when you begin speaking.
For the record, my name is Michael Harrison, Council President, members of Council. I'm speaking on behalf of Portland's bicycling demographic. The e-bike industry is growing. It's projected to reach $118 billion by 2030, according to Allied Market Research. We are only going to see more e-bikes and bicycles on our streets. Although I appreciate the minimal bicycle infrastructure we have, I have been proposing elevated bicycle infrastructure for a couple years. I have an unofficial signed petition I have collected that I'm delivering with 500 signatures in support of an elevated bicycle skyway system for Portland. Elevated meaning physically placed above the conventional car traffic grid or empty land space. These signatures were collected at the PSU Farmers Market last summer. Generally speaking, the public seems to like the idea of a bicycle skyway system from what I could tell at my petition signing events. Similar infrastructure already exists elsewhere around the world. There's a lot we can do to research this kind of infrastructure for Portland. I would like to see Metro request a preliminary study in conjunction with an engineering firm or discuss this with the Portland City Council or ODOT. There are a few locations in Portland that can use this kind of infrastructure. It can have off-ramps leading to schools, universities, shopping centers, and corporate work locations, as well as to multiple public parks and residential areas. This is a climate-friendly transportation improvement. As bicyclists, we don't waste money on gas or car insurance, and a bicycle skyway system helps promote that. As Americans, we waste about $5,000 per year on gas. I've already contacted ODOT staff and representatives in the state legislature concerning this. If you have any questions, there is more information in these packets and petitions I'm delivering. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can bring those up to me and I can distribute them to the counselors. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So next up, we have somebody on Zoom. So Alondra Flores Avina. I'll go ahead and promote you, Alondra. All right, Alondra, you should be able to unmute yourself and turn on your camera now. You'll have 3 minutes and your time will begin when you begin speaking. Alondra, are you able to unmute? There we go.
Hello, yes.
All right, so you'll have 3 minutes to testify and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
For the record, my name is Alondra Flores Avina, and I am the Environmental Promoter Program Manager with Trash for Peace. Good morning, Council President and members of the Council. Today, I'm testifying on how the 2030 Regional Waste Plan has made an impact with Trash for Peace and the communities we work with. During the development of the 2030 Regional Waste Plan, Trash for Peace has actively participated as a community partner, contributing valuable input. This marked the initial stride taken by Metro to engage with broader range of communities. Communities have openly communicated the challenges they confronted in multifamily housing concerning the waste and recycling system. Some of the key difficulties they encounter encompass accessibility, safety, educational resources, and transportation related to their waste and recycling. Since the implementation of the 2030 Regional Waste Plan, our collaboration with community, local organizations, and government agency has been remarkably close. A pivotal initiative in aligning with the plan's objectives was the Environmental Promoter Program. This program is specifically designed for individuals residing in multifamily housing sites with which we have established partnerships. It operates on a 6-month cycle, typically accommodating a cohort of 10 to 20 participants. Throughout the program, participants engage in a series of training sessions focusing on recycling, waste prevention, and healthy homes. The trainings equipped them with knowledge and skills that they subsequently put into action. Participants actively participate in community outreach, take on leadership roles, and conduct educational activities based on their insights that they have gained from their trainings. This program offers flexibility, enabling participants to pursue personal projects such as creating artwork from recycled materials, organizing and leading workshops, and volunteering with community gardens and other partnerships. The environmental promoters at New Columbia and St. John's have made a significant impact, reaching approximately 7,000 individuals with their community throughout their dedicated efforts. We highly value our collaboration with Metro, eagerly anticipate our ongoing efforts and supports of the 2030 Regional Waste Plan. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you. All right, if anyone else wishes to testify on non-agenda items, once again, this is the time to do so. And you can sign up now by hitting the raise hand button. So I'll just give folks another couple of seconds here. All right, and I don't see any other hands going up. President Peterson.
Great, thank you. I will close public communication on non-agenda items and move on to the presentation. We have resolution number 23-5354 for the purpose of proclaiming September 15th through October 15th as Hispanic Heritage Month in the Portland Metro region. I want to welcome the Latinos in Government Alliance, who is here today to help us in recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month. Together, we can celebrate the community and its many contributions. This also helps raise awareness about the systematic challenges that the community faces and commit to supporting equitable outcomes through funding and collaboration. With us today is Metro Policy Advisor Eduardo Ramos. Where did he go? Oh. Poof, disappeared. Who will walk us through the resolution and the recognition. Thank you. Eduardo.
Well, thank you, and good morning. It's very exciting to be here. I'll introduce myself again for the record. I'm Eduardo Ramos, Policy Advisor to Councilor Garrett Rosenthal. And as the son of Spanish-speaking Oaxaqueños farm workers, it is always an honor to represent my community in these government spaces where working families continue to be systemically excluded. I've led a career fighting for families in all levels of government and in advocacy spaces, so it's an honor to bring myself my personal experience and professional experience to the table. This is Amparo Agosto. She is the Community Engagement Manager at TriMet. And Amparo, would you like to introduce yourself briefly at this moment?
Yes, thank you. My name's Amparo Agosto. I'm a member of Liga, and I'm a Community Engagement Manager at TriMet.
Great. So more from Amparo in a minute. So we're overjoyed to be here at Metro Council and joined by staff to mark the beginning of Hispanic Heritage Month and recognize a regional champion like Cynthia Carmina Gomez, who is sitting behind me. From September 15th to October 15th, communities across the region and Oregon will be hosting small and large parties. Many of them will also be hosting educational opportunities for the community to dive deeper into the history of our diverse Latino communities. We've shared a calendar of some of those activities with you in the agenda packet. Okay, well, before going further, I'd like to introduce our guests. While they were all listed, we are not here to filibuster your meeting. No, don't worry about that. What I wanted to do was note the regional representation and the tremendous effort that it took to bring this proclamation and recognition of this awesome individual forward. Our membership includes Latino professionals from across the region, across Oregon, and Southwest Washington. So if they can please stand and remain standing when I call their name. We have our Liga President, Betsy Rodriguez-Roof, Community Engagement Manager from the city of Tualatin, Amparo Agosto, who you've met, Jairo Rios Campos, Wood Village City Councilor and Play East Recreation Manager, may be joining us online, Ricardo Palazuelos, Bilingual Community Outreach Specialist from Washington County, Irma Orozco Dowd from the city of Salem, which when I moved here I thought was in California, near California. Ana Quintrell from the city of Vancouver, also joined by her, Eric Estrada, also from the city of Vancouver, Tina Escalera from the city of Tigard may be joining us online, Carol Orozco from TriMet, and Jimmy Oporta from Metro Housing. So we're all very excited to be here. Great. Well, Latinos in Government started as a scrappy group, convened during the pandemic. It was just 5 of us working to better serve the communities of South Washington County, where we often see gaps in service. It has since barreled into a strong network of professionals advancing Latino representation in decision-making and engagement to create equitable and thriving communities. So we believe that drawing attention to Hispanic Heritage Month in this regional space raises awareness and invites Metro and all its jurisdictional partners to evaluate how they are supporting our community. Okay, before I hand it off to Amparo, I'll note that we do have a photo for Councilor Rosenthal for being very supportive of our proclamation today. Thank you for being an ally and working with me as equals, despite holding the election certificate. I enjoy representing District 3, and really when I brought the idea to Councilor Rosenthal, I said jump and he said how high. So thank you for being an ally in that. The photo is of indigenous Triqui women in the street market in Santiago, Hutzlahuaca, Oaxaca. It's not displayed on the screen, but it's over here, so we can share later. Anyway, so a symbol of the diversity of Latinos and our entrepreneurial spirit, and I also know you enjoy a good pattern, so you'll get a good kick out of the photo. Okay, to expand on today's proclamation, I'll yield to Amparo.
Yeah, thank you, Eduardo, and good morning, Metro Council and staff. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here with you today. And as an active member of Liga, I am thrilled to have the opportunity to celebrate the beginning of Hispanic Heritage Month and its significance that it has for all of us here today. The Latino community is diverse. It's one of the most diverse, with folks represented descending from Spain, the Caribbean, North, Central, and South America. Our communities also have strong indigenous ties. African and Asian identities are also manifested through our appearance, our traditions, our celebrations, our languages, and much more. We are a community of extensive heritage. And this year, Liga invites the region to celebrate Prosperidad para Todos. This is a vision for regional prosperity where Latinos are supported through funding, education, and collaboration. Our rapidly growing community is driving local and national, political, economic, and social life. We staff the critical sectors that will help us solve the behemoth issues our regional is facing. But that doesn't mean that we aren't also shattering barriers in other industries. Latinos have led major innovations and transformations throughout history, yet continue to be systematically excluded. As we look to the future, we must work to ensure Latinos of all backgrounds are able to access opportunities for wealth building, training, and decision-making, as well as general stability and health. Latinos stimulate the Oregon economy with $3 billion in purchasing power and a fierce entrepreneurial spirit, which creates jobs through an array of small businesses. And the data points to Latina women specifically leading the charge. Our community is also reaching new heights in political and social representation. Today's Liga presence is a prime example of how our community is working to ensure the success of future generations while addressing immediate needs. We celebrate the many Latine Oregonianos who've endured the scrutiny that Latinos and people of color generally face in running for public office. And we continue to hold each other accountable for substantive representation. Finally, we call on Metro and its regional partners to today and over the next month, and really the entire year, to consider how they amplify our community's voice and your investment toward that vision for Prosperidad para Todos. Please join us in aiming for stronger support and also at the various celebrations around the region. Muchas gracias.
Great, well, thank you, Amparo. And now before we let you proceed with the proclamation, we wanted to use the space. So in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, it is our great honor, Liga, to recognize Cynthia Carmina Gomez, Director of Community and Civic Impact at Portland State University, for her career fostering Latino leadership and prosperity through civic action, family support, mentorship, and higher education. Cynthia unequivocally represents our theme of Prosperidad para Todos. She has been and continues to be at the center of many efforts advancing Latinos in Oregon. The regional membership of Liga wanted to highlight and thank Cynthia for positively impacting the lives of many, including Liga professionals. Cynthia's work more broadly has catalyzed substantive representation and economic prosperity for our communities. Cynthia is a futurist, cultural strategist, and creative writer with an MFA in nonfiction writing and a master's education. She is a champion for vibrant, safe, and thriving communities. And Cynthia has served Latino families in the early days of Latino Network. She founded leadership programs and civic engagement initiatives in what would later become a major regional organization. So she's no stranger to Metro. Actually, in this very room, she led civic education workshops, public testimony workshops. So we're very glad to welcome her back. Last year, Cynthia launched Latine Futures, a community collaboration to create a bold vision for our community's future. These trans-sector gatherings yielded a vision for collective wealth building and well-being. She challenged us attendees to balance immediate needs with long-term planning to ensure the future of our community. I am proud to call Cynthia Carmina Gomez a friend and mentor. She played a huge role in kickstarting my public service career here in Oregon. I vividly remember the moment when she approached me at a time where I was facing a lot of personal hardship and was feeling disillusioned with the political system. And I happened to be charging my phone in the hallway next to a vending machine when she stopped and said, why don't you come into the multicultural centers? We have chargers there, and I think you'll really enjoy everybody. So she has a way of inspiring people and bringing out people's potential. So that's my personal connection and my Cynthia story. I think many of us around the region have a similar story. Okay, and Cynthia, would you like to use this space to say a few words before we give you the rest of the recognition?
Thank you. It's a huge honor and a privilege to be here with you all. I was born in a migrant camp, Camp 52, in the outskirts of Phoenix, in cotton fields, actually. And I was born in a little trailer, moved to Yuma, Arizona, grew up on the border, and at 18, when I was allowed to leave the house, it's a very conservative family from the state of Sinaloa, Mexico. I, went to college, I dropped out, I worked for a long time, landed in Portland in '93. Some people would call me an Oregonian now because I've been here long enough, I guess. And when I first moved here, it was really hard because I didn't have my community. And it was through Latino Network and actually through the Líderes program that I helped form at Latino Network. It really helped me find a home here. And Metro, I consider a home and a place because we used to spend a lot of time here every year with our monolingual Spanish-speaking community leaders. And they would sit up where you are sitting and they would like practice, with the gavel and they would sit here and practice giving, yes, there it is, practice giving testimony. And we also held lidercitos, which is, líderes means leaders, and lidercitos is little leaders. And so the children of the community members who would participate in the training would go just right down the hall and they would learn about Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and they would develop their own leadership as young people. And I think about them now as they're all probably in college and, buying homes and growing their families because that's how long ago it was. And really honored to come full circle and back into this space, and being recognized in this way is very special. It's really hard for me to not mention Portland State because I am so deeply rooted in that community for the last 23 years. We are an emerging Hispanic serving institution. Over 23% of our full-time undergraduate students are Latine, and that number is growing exponentially. Once we hit 25%, we will be a federally designated Hispanic serving institution. We are the region's principal workforce. 70% of our students stay in Oregon, and 80% of them stay in the region. And you can't throw a stick without hitting a PSU graduate in the city. So I'm really, really proud of that.
I'm just waiting for the sticks, tomatoes.
And I can't say how proud I am of that. Portland State needs everybody's support. We are a public institution, and we really need everybody's support to ensure that our students succeed. And And Metro's always been a great partner. And Eduardo, thank you so much. It wasn't just calling you into the Multicultural Center, it's what you did after that that was so amazing. He just basically just came in, he joined our advisory, he joined another committee, it was like a space committee to help us grow our presence in the building and the student union. It's just really been fantastic to be able to see you grow as a leader, and I'm just really proud to call you my friend. So thank you.
Well, Cynthia, thank you for those words. And finally, for you, we have a photo of Doña Marta. She was preparing picaditas on my diplomatic and cultural tour of Oaxaca. She is the leader, the rock of the Rojas Enriquez family in the Mixteca Baja region in Oaxaca, Mexico. And despite her language barriers and lack of basic infrastructure, she led the family in building prosperity. And her story reminds me of the story of my own grandmother and other women in my life, and is a representation of what Amparo mentioned earlier, that Latinas are the engine of our economy here and everywhere. So thank you for this, for allowing us to use this regional space to kick off Hispanic Heritage Month and recognize such a selfless leader. And so again, join us in celebrating the many Latino contributions locally and nationally. We've invited you to our celebrations, and we hope you'll also take this time to reflect on how we're supporting the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. I will take a motion from Councilor Rosenthal and a second, and then we can have some discussion and comment.
So moved to adopt.
I would love to second.
Been moved by, yes, Councilor Rosenthal moved and seconded by Councilor Gonzalez. Any further discussion, comment?
Mr. Member of the motion?
I'm just glad to be part of this, a small part, and I think it's an important thing to recognize and to celebrate going forward, and there's a lot of good festivals. There's El Tigre coming up in Tigard, and we had Viva La Tualatin earlier in the year, so there's a lot going on.
Yeah, Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks, President Peterson. Well, first, I'll start out by saying que orgullo, you know, que se sienta el orgullo. That's right. It means how proud, you know. We're very proud. Well, thank you, Eduardo, for organizing the proclamation, but most importantly, you know, the sense of community that has grown. I mean, Cynthia, you mentioned what your experience was like here when you moved here, and you know, hace unos años, we're not going to say when again, you know, que se pierda ese número. And the groundwork that you've done, and so many of the other, you know, leaders here that I've had the pleasure to get to know personally over many years as a young man as well, and creating a really vibrant place, welcoming that not just a place that we work or that we buy a home, but that really is a place of belonging. So I feel a huge sense of pride in the work that you do as Liga, in representation and fighting the small fights and winning the small wins that ultimately, you know, un granito de arena a la vez, right? So I want to really acknowledge your hard work, all of you, as local government staff, local government leaders that help us, the elected officials, ultimately truly serve our communities and to really help the money, the programs, the policies ultimately do what, you know, we're hopefully intending to do. So I want to acknowledge that. I feel a lot of pride in the work that Metro has done across a whole lot of different areas. Pero también I know we have a lot of, there's still so much work to do, and more and more Latinos will call the region home, and more people of color and families of color will call this region home. And there's a lot of work that we need to do to make sure that people don't only just survive, but that they thrive. And that's everything from garbage policy to housing to how we use transit to, you know, how we pay our water bill, all those things, right? And obviously everything there. So just prosperidad para todos. I love that. And I know that you mean that from the bottom of your heart. So thank you so much. And I'm really happy that we get to vote to approve this resolution today and that we're having this celebración. Y pues hasta la próxima y muchos más.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I guess, oh yeah, go ahead, Councilor Wall.
Yeah, thanks, Madam President, and thank you all for being here. You know, I've done a lot of proclamations in May, and I know it's a real commitment to spend part of your day and come visit with your elected officials, but it means a lot. So thank you so much for being here. And, you know, as a new faculty member at PSU, I did not know the impact that Cynthia had on that institution, but once I started like being in the classroom and could just like really feel the work that you've done to make PSU such a more inclusive place for communities of color. So thank you for your work, well-deserved award. And like Councilor Gonzalez said, you know, we're working really hard to center our racial equity strategy and really want to make sure that our programs and investments reflect that. So thank you for being here and continuing to push on us.
Thank you. Councilor Simpson and then Lewis.
Thank you, Metro Council President. Thank you, Eduardo, and thank you, community. It's always heartening for me to see the power of organizing. It means a lot and it's special to me because I oftentimes see us in community and we're all scattered about and doing our thing, and for Eduardo to have the foresight to say, hey, let's organize and do some policy shaping and power building. That's amazing. And I will say, you know, y'all said something earlier, and I do believe this in everything. Latin American history should be taught every day. It should be a part of the fabric of everything because we are part of that fabric that make up this country. We are the one that keeps this country going or has continued to keep this country going. So my hat's off to you, and I'm hopefully I can make a few celebrations myself and come and party with y'all. So thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody being here today to celebrate a proclamation, which is more than a piece of paper. It is the people who have built an organization, a network with a name and with some power. But first and foremost, we're all people, and we got to celebrate one leader today. Eduardo, you're next. But the opportunity to really recognize that community isn't held by bounds of a region, and that we've got Salem here, that we've got Vancouver here. You know, maybe we'll get down to Southern Oregon someday. That's not where Salem is. But the opportunity to really recognize what's happening in communities with festivals and with networks that hold the power, that can share in making sure that this is a place where we can all you know, have good jobs, healthy lives, and a safe place to call home. That's what Metro is about. So thanks for being here. Really excited. Y'all get half of 2 months as part of your celebration month. So starting tomorrow, we'll all celebrate. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Just to round it out, since we brought PSU into it, I also came here in 1993, and so thank you for making me Oregonian. Appreciate that. But I think what I reflect on as PSU was where I came as part of my journey of learning how to build community rather than destroy, as my profession, highway design and construction engineering, was too narrow focused for me. And so one of the things that I learned at PSU that I then carried into my elected officialism, which has then grown, and I want to point out this as I say it, I was taught when you are a planner, you are not representing those who are in the room only, you are representing everybody else. So for those who are not in the room, their voices have to be heard in the room. But we never took it the next step further until many, many years later, which is those voices should actually be in the room. And I think through all of the organizing that you have done and all the growing of how do you engage in the system and not make it a black box, not make it, and hopefully we have made it a more welcoming place to be, those voices are actually at the table and not being represented by somebody else in the room. And so I think hats off to all of you for being part of that. Hats off to all the Metro staff who have gotten us this far to make this place a welcoming place. And thanks to all of the voices at this table and our leadership down at this end of the table for being able to represent all of those values that we hold dear of bringing voices to the table and letting them share their own perspective. So thank you. With that, I will call for, what are we doing? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. All right, we have some fun resolutions coming up next. Resolution number 23-5351 for the purpose of confirming the reappointment of Danielle Milan to the Metropolitan Exposition Recreation Commission. And with us today is Steve Falstick, our General Manager of Metro Visitor Venues. Steve.
Oh, and President Peterson, we haven't done the consent agenda yet.
Okay, we'll come back.
Okay, just-
Good point.
Thank you again, everyone, for coming. That means a lot. Gracias. Should we do a photo? I mean,
We haven't done one of these in a really long time.
yeah.
You usually do photos, right?
Should we pause and do a photo real quick? Would that be okay?
Yeah. Yes, let's do
5-minute
that.
break? Okay.
Okay, calling a
All right.
timeout. Yeah, go.
Sorry, Steve.
Just kidding.
Recording stopped.
What are we doing?
Thanks.
Oh.
We might.
Recording in progress.
We are recording.
I know, but there was still music playing. I'd like to call back to order the Metro Council business meeting. Thank you for allowing us to take some pictures. That was the first resolution that we've had for people in person since, in my estimation, 2019. So thank you for reminding me that we want to stop and take a moment and celebrate. So thank you.
As always, Councilor Wong.
Oh, well, thank you, Counselor Wong.
I love the photos.
Always up for
Documentation.
the photo shoot.
Gotta
All right,
document.
Steve, let's turn it back to you for the resolution confirming appointment.
It's great to see you all in person. Believe it or not, I'm not part of Eduardo's presentation, although had we strategized, it probably would have been appropriate. I'm here to speak to the reappointment of Commissioner Danielle Milan. Before I do that, I want to give a quick thanks to Councilor Gonzalez, who last week raised his hand on a piece of business that we could potentially bid on, Latinos in Transit, which we're working with, he's coordinated working with TriMet and our partners at Travel Portland to land that piece of business for next year. So always appreciate when our commissioners are finding business for us out there. Multnomah County has nominated Danielle Milan for reappointment on the MERC Commission. The council president has concurred with this nomination accordingly, submitted her appointment to the council for confirmation. A copy of the nomination letter from Multnomah County is attached as attachment 1 in the staff report. If confirmed, Ms. Milan will, pursuant to Metro Code, serve a 4-year term beginning September 23rd of 2023 through September 23rd, 2027. Her bio is also part of your packet, and I just want to read part of that to you. For those of you that don't know Commissioner Milan, she co-founded Milagro Theater with her husband, Jose Eduardo Gonzalez. And in 1989, she co-created the bilingual educational program Teatro Milagro, which tours regionally and nationally. As a co-founder, Milan manages staff and activities in the Milagro Cultural Center, as well as outreach programs in schools, providing budget oversight and staff membership. For program development, she researches script ideas and works with playwrights, directors, composers, and choreographers for the creation of the Milagro productions. For Milagro's residencies and workshops, she has collaboratively designed and implemented curriculum for K through 12 schools, colleges, and community groups. We are really looking forward to her continued leadership and contributions as a member of the MERC Commission. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
And the second, it's been moved by Councilor Lewis, seconded by Councilor Rosenthal. Councilors, is there any further discussion? Councilor Lewis.
Sure, I just want to really thank Steve for bringing forward Commissioner Milan's nomination from the county. I find that her view of the arts community and in particular focus on performing venues is a real addition and asset to MERC. So absolutely excited to have her continued participation.
Great, thank you. Just for the record, we are taking a vote on the resolution number 23-5351. With that, Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. Councilor Wong.
Aye.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Aye.
Councilor Simpson.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye, thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Today's consent agenda now consists of 10 items. Resolution number 23-5349 for the purpose of confirming the appointment of Michael Hull and Sanjaya Silga to the Metro Central Station Community Enhancement Committee. Resolution number 23-5350 for the purpose of confirming the appointment of members to the Investment Advisory Board. And consideration of council meeting minutes for May 30th, June 15th, June 22nd, June 29th, July 11th, July 18th, July 20th, and July 27th. Staff had time to get through all of those while we were on council recess, evidently. Thank you. Much appreciated. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor Simpson and seconded by Councilor Gonzalez. All of those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. All right, moving back onto the agenda. We will move on to resolution number 23-5352 for the purpose of approving the purchase of certain real property for the Regional Illegal Dumping Deployment Center. We have Marta McGuire with us today and Stephanie Rawson. Thank you both. The big day.
Good morning. Thank you, Council President Petersons and councilors. Again, my name is Marta McGuire, and I'm Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Director. As noted, we are seeking approval from council to purchase the property to house our RID cleanup crews. RID is one of the most critical services that we provide as a part to help clean up dumped garbage in the region. I have Stephanie Rawson here, who manages that program, that is going to take us through the proposal.
Good morning, Council President Peterson, Metro Councilors. My name is Stephanie Rawson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Community Stewardship Manager in the Waste Prevention Environmental Services Department. As Marta mentioned, I'm here to share some information about the program and seek council approval to purchase the property on Southeast 8th in Portland, which we currently lease and use to house the program. Can we move to the next slide, please? As you know, the RID Patrol program provides cleanup services addressing dumped and abandoned waste from public spaces. During its 30-year history, the RID Patrol program has proven to be a valuable resource for the greater Portland area in addressing cleanup issues and enhancing livability. Each year, the program continues to see an increase in requests for services. For example, in calendar year 2022, RID Patrol cleaned up more than 1,100 tons of waste from more than 6,500 sites across the region. In 2021, Metro Council allocated $2.5 million in funding for staffing, equipment, and other resources necessary to both stabilize RID service levels during the pandemic and support long-term implementation of program services and the workforce transition program. As a result of this 2021 budget allocation, program staffing increased from 7 to 13 staff, which include operations and planning staff, and increased contract staff from 5 to 9. This investment helped to improve services, bring average response times back to within 3 business days by December of 2021. You may recall that response time skyrocketed to more than 60 days in early 2021. So our current average response time for 2023 is 2.5 business days, so that we appreciate that investment. Next slide, please. As RID continues to expand its workforce transition program, serving people facing systemic barriers to employment and impacted by the carceral system, it is essential to have a stable, long-term space that meets the program's unique needs and that is highly accessible through various transit options. In 2020, a strategic plan for the program expansion was developed with council guidance that identified the program needs one facility that accommodates current and future program operations. RID Patrol previously worked from multiple locations, including the St. John's landfill, and faced challenges with the non-central location, long daily travel, train delays, limited space, which impacted service delivery. Metro engaged a consultant to determine program space needs as property search was initiated. Next slide, please. So the staff conducted an extensive property search to identify appropriate facilities to house the program. The property search initially focused on properties already owned or leased by Metro. After we looked through those sites, we began looking at other non-Metro properties. Through the various properties that we looked at, in June of 2021, the property located on Southeast 8th in Portland was evaluated and determined to be the best fit among the current available properties. Metro entered into a 5-year lease agreement that began on August 15th, 2021. Next slide, please. The site provides the space necessary for the program staff and for operating supplies, vehicles, and equipment, allowing the program to work effectively without having resources spread across multiple facilities. The site's central location allows for staff to arrive via public transit, bike, or car, and provides convenient access to transportation routes to get to reported cleanup sites. Next slide, please. This is the location highlighted in red. You can see that there's 2 highlighted bike routes. The site is bordered to Southeast 8th Avenue on the west, Southeast Clay on the north. The central location is ideal for service delivery as well as access by staff. You can see there's 2 large carports on site. We have installed a ramp so the vehicles can drive through, have covered parking, and improve traffic flow. There has been some building improvements made to accommodate the program, including internet, security, fire systems, and HVAC. Next slide, please. This purchase supports Road Patrol's expanding workforce transition program by providing the space necessary to support operations, workforce training, and development. Metro is developing the garbage and recycling system facilities plan to explore opportunities for modernizing facilities, expanding services to meet the region's needs, and closing gaps in access to these essential services. This RID Patrol Deployment Center provides the space for potential new services in addition to ongoing RID Patrol operations. Next slide, please. The policy options we have for you today are: one, to approve the purchase of the property at 1630 Southeast 8th Avenue in Portland for the continued use by the RID Patrol program, or to direct staff to continue to lease this property and seek alternative long-term options. Next slide, please. A central deployment center is a key component to the long-term stability of the program. Therefore, staff recommends approval to the purchase of the property for the continued use of the site. If council approves, the purchase would close early October. Thank you for your time. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council, any questions for staff? Seeing none, I just want to say that I think we're all very excited. I think this is a program that we treasure and value, not just by the council, not just by the staff, but the entirety of this region. The amazingness of the work that you have done to date before the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic is just off the charts. So I think you have full support going forward and just so much appreciation from all of us, so.
Well, thank you. The team appreciates your support.
And, you know, I'm addicted to coming out with you and picking
We
up trash.
always welcome
which-
extra hands.
It's an addiction. Counselor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Mr. Peterson. Yeah, I mean, no question in particular. You know, I want to share how impressed I've been with the way that this has progressed. You know, in addition to the programmatic elements that we've really just kind of created this wonderful umbrella of achieving our mission that I just feel like a joy for, and I'm happy that we're at this point. And so kudos to you, to everyone that worked on basically getting us to this point and you know, getting us into a good position.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you to the RID team for helping me on my cleanup as well. I mean, I love the RID team.
We're all addicted.
You know, I'm trying to be
it.
diplomatic and all that, but I freaking love the RID team. So.
Thank you.
Boil it down.
Yeah.
Counselor Rosenthal.
I'd just like to say, I also appreciate the help, the cleanup of TV Highway, which would collecting the garbage. The RID Patrol program is a great program, and this is a great location. I think the RID Patrol is probably almost as popular, though, as the zoo, even though not quite as cute as the red panda. But, you know, that's saying something, so I think it's a great deal. Anyhow, very strong support.
Thank you.
Well, with that, councilors, do I have a motion to approve resolution number 23-5352 for the purpose of approving the purchase of certain real property for the regional illegal dump
So moved.
deployment center?
Seconded.
Moved by Counselor Lewis and seconded by Counselor Gonzalez. Counter, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Counselor Simpson.
Aye.
Counselor Wong.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Yes.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Yes, sir.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing the improvements and the support that gives the team, so thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our ordinances. First reading and public hearing, ordinance number 23-1497 for the purpose of annexing to the Metro District approximately 0.71 acres located west of Northeast Star Boulevard, north of Northeast Huffman Street, and south of Northeast Constable Street in Hillsborough. We have Carrie McLaren, our Metro Attorney, now to read the procedural requirements for this portion of the meeting.
My microphone is on. Because this annexation involves a land use application that requires a quasi-judicial hearing, there are some additional procedural requirements that must be addressed. First, council members must declare a conflict of interest or ex parte contact prior to the staff presentation. If a counselor has a conflict of interest, they are not allowed to participate in the council discussion or vote on that application. If a counselor has had an ex parte contact, they must declare the substance of it on the record, and it is subject to rebuttal. Discussions with Metro staff are not considered ex parte contacts. Counselors will be asked to declare any conflict of interest or an ex parte contact after I describe additional procedural requirements. For quasi-judicial hearings of this type, Oregon land use statutes require the following statement. Under Section 3.09.070 of the Metro Code, this type of annexation into the Metro District boundary must be initiated by petition, which must be reviewed and acted on by the council following a public hearing. Public testimony at this hearing should only address the applicable approval criteria. The approval criteria are set forth in Section 3.09.070 of the Metro Code and are more specifically identified in the staff report, which is part of the packet of materials before the council today. The decision of the council is final, although it can be challenged by filing a notice of intent to appeal with the Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days of the final decision. If any person fails to raise an issue in person during the hearing or by letter, or fails to provide sufficient evidence to allow the council to respond to an issue, that issue may not be the basis for an appeal to LUBA. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to give the council an opportunity to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court under ORS 197.796. The hearing procedures, and then I will close. First, Metro staff will present a short report. The staff report will describe the proposal, identify the applicable approval criteria, and summarize the staff recommendation. An applicant then may then make a presentation in support of their application. Following the applicant's presentation, if any, other persons in support of the application will be given an opportunity to speak. Opponents of the application will then have an opportunity to speak, and the applicant may then rebut any testimony from opponents. After that, public testimony will be closed, and after the record is closed by all parties, council members may discuss the request and ask questions of staff. A council vote will not be held until after the second reading. This hearing is part of the official record. In your testimony, please speak specifically about this application and how the criteria relate to the request. Please submit a copy of any written testimony, and we will include that as part of the record. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. With that, the case matter being reviewed is proposed ordinance number 23-1497 for the purpose of annexing to the Metro District approximately 0.71 acres located west of Northeast Star Boulevard, north of Northeast Huffman Street, and south of Northeast Constable Street in Hillsborough. Councilors, do any council members have ex parte contacts to disclose at this time? Oh. Everybody's shaking head no. Do any council members have a conflict of interest to declare at this time? Shaking heads, no. All right, I will now call on Associate Regional Planner Glenn Hamburg to introduce the ordinance. Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, good morning, Council President Peterson and councilors. I'm Glenn Hamburg, Associate Regional Planner, and I use he, him pronouns. As summarized, this hearing is for an ordinance which, if adopted, would annex to the Metro District boundary approximately 0.71 acres. It's a narrow strip of land, as you can see in the packet. The property is in Hillsborough. It is in Council District 4. It's on the west side of Northeast Star Boulevard between Huffman and Constable Streets. It's roughly north of the Hillsborough Airport. While the territory is already inside the urban growth boundary, is inside Hillsborough's city limits, and has already been planned and zoned for urban industrial use by the city, it's necessary that the application or that the property be annexed to the district for any of that urban industrial development to occur. So as always, I'll recite, including for the public, the criteria for the annexation to the Metro District boundary, which as noted are in subsection 309070E of the Metro Code. And those criteria are as follows. 1, that the property be in the urban growth boundary. 2, that the territory be subject to measures that prevent its urbanization until the territory is either annexed to a city or to a service district that will provide the necessary urban services. And then finally, 3, that the proposal be consistent with any applicable cooperative or urban service agreements that are adopted pursuant to ORS Chapter 195 in the concept plan. So as outlined in the staff report, this application meets all of that criteria for annexation. The territory was included in the UGB back in 2005 with the adoption of Metro Ordinance 05-1070A. The territory was, as I've noted, already annexed to the city of Hillsborough under their local ordinance number 6447, so it's no longer under the land use jurisdiction of Washington County. The territory has already been zoned by the city for urban industrial use, consistent with the city's duly adopted comprehensive plan. And urban services to the territory's prospective development would be provided by the city of Hillsborough, by Clean Water Services, and future development will need to comply with the land use regulations of the city. The owner of the subject territory, which is the Hillsborough Economic Development Council, that I understand is the city's urban renewal agency under ORS 457, has specifically requested and consented to this annexation. And notice of the proposal was published in the Oregonian, posted on site, and mailed to nearby property owners and other interested parties. And staff have received no comments either for or against the application and no questions about the application. Therefore, staff recommends approval of this ordinance number 23-1497. And I'm available to answer any questions, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff at this time? Seeing none, I will move on to the public hearing for ordinance number 23-1497. We'll open the public hearing. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public hearing on ordinance number 23-1497?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on ordinance number 23-1497, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. You can do so by raising your hand, either in person or on Zoom. If you're on Zoom, the raise hand button is either at the bottom of your screen or within the Reactions tab. For those on Zoom today, I'll be promoting you to a full panelist to allow you to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. So I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. And once you accept it, you'll become a full panelist. And as a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, President Peterson, councilors, we have not had anybody sign up in advance to speak. I don't see any hands up on Zoom or physically in our room either.
Great, thank you. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. There will be a second reading and council consideration of votes scheduled for September 28th. Thank you so much, Glenn. All right, we'll move on to other business. Today we have a conversation about our regional waste plan outcomes and council priorities discussion. As we all know, WPAS plays a critical role in overseeing and planning our region's waste system. During the creation of the fiscal year budget, council directed the Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department to provide ongoing technical education on regional waste priorities to inform future council direction on the budget and regional waste fees. Today's session is a series of engagements with the council to this fall to provide additional context to support council decisions on key projects and development of the fiscal year 24 budget. On Tuesday, the council discussed the regional waste plan guidance, and we had a bit of consensus around the values, but a lot of discussion we knew was coming up on the implementation. So I will, again, thank you, Marta, for coming back up today, and go ahead with the beginning of this conversation. Appreciate it.
Again, my name is Marta McGuire, and I'm the Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Director, and I have here with me Shane Adma from the Office of Metro Attorney. We really do appreciate the opportunity to continue these engagements and discussions with you today. You can go to the next slide. As Council President Peterson stated, our presentation builds on our discussion from Tuesday. Today, we will recap some of the key themes that we heard. We'll cover our levers for advancing progress, current actions and investments, and we do see this as an initial discussion that we'll continue to build from. Next week, we'll also have another engagement with you that will be focused on the System Facilities Plan, which is the plan that will look at future investments for a plan for infrastructure investments for the future. Next slide. I want to first just start with a reminder of our primary responsibility, which is to manage waste safely for people in the environment. And our work falls into the 3 key areas listed here. To fulfill this role, we work collaboratively with cities and counties to plan for the region. We provide direct services. We work in policy and regulations to reduce waste. Next slide. We spent Tuesday reviewing the regional waste plan development and the 3 sets of outcomes that are listed here, which really aims to achieve shared prosperity, healthy environment, and excellent, accessible, and resilient garbage and recycling system. Councillor Wong, you'll see that we brought up the resilience part. This really is reflected in the plan, and we wanted to make sure that's really articulated and highlighted in our outcome statements. Next slide. This slide captures the main themes from the discussion that we heard on Tuesday. We hope to further build on these to clarify council priorities to help guide regional waste plan implementation and next year's budget development. To help further inform these, we want to review our levers to advance progress toward council priorities and regional outcomes. Next slide. So we have 4 main levers for advancing progress that are listed here. First is our own regulatory authority, the policies and regulations that we put in place. Second is legislative advocacy. So this is the work that we do at the state level, including the legislative agenda that you set each year. Third is our investments through grants, sponsorships, and partnerships, and as well as into our own facilities, like the investment that we just made with the RID Deployment Center. And lastly is direct service. So those are the programs that we provide directly to communities throughout the region. I do want to note that partnerships is really an inherent component of all of these levers that we have. Next slide.
Marta, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you go back to the outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely.
One more slide. Back. There we go. In all of this, where is the actual reduction of waste outcome?
That's a great question.
Okay. I mean, we weren't here, we only have one counselor that was part of the actual creation of this plan. So I'm sure that that's part of it somewhere, but it's not listed as an outcome. Yeah.
So it is a primary objective of the plan as it serves as our statutorily required waste reduction plan. So it's inherent in the statements around better purchasing choices and reduced consumption because those goals and actions in the plan are directly related to preventing waste. How do we change people's behaviors to create less waste? So it's inherent in that. When we talk about more opportunities for reuse and repair, that's also a mechanism that we have to prevent materials that still have use in them from going toward disposal. So those are some, as well as collection services. We know that we need to have accessible, convenient, and affordable collection services in order to promote recycling to end up in the recycling cart versus the garbage cart. So those are just some examples that are included in there, and I believe the waste prevention part is more specific into the weeds of the more than 20 goals and 100 actions that are in the plan.
I appreciate that. Is there any? And we had this conversation on Tuesday of the parallel processes of the regional transportation plan and this. Is there any formal legal regulatory statewide direction that says that waste should be reduced by X percentage over a certain time or X percentage per capita, or is there a statutory goal?
There's state recovery goals for the regional waste shed, and that's also why we have annual waste tons generated as one of our indicators for the plan. So that is a measure that we're tracking and a goal that we're working towards. So we do have that. Metro represents the waste shed for the region, so that is something that we report on and are accountable for and that we're measuring.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Great question. Well, and in part, some of the measures around, with this regional waste plan, that shift to the life cycle framework that we talked about last time, in part, that direction that we got from the state was to recognize that it's not only about measuring the weight of garbage as it is disposed. It's also about looking at the toxicity of what's in the products, because there's environmental impacts beyond that. In addition, looking at the greenhouse gas emissions of what products are. So there has been a shift from only focusing on recovery goals to looking more widely at what the environmental impacts are of products, because it's more than that.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Absolutely. And please, we really do want, I know we're in the formal council meeting format, but we really do want this to be a discussion. So I encourage you, as Shane and I both present, to feel free to have us pause as we go through this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is going to be the overreaching context in which we need to have a discussion about everything, right? Of whether it's actually trending towards the right direction, and how we make those trade-offs, and looking forward to your scenario, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as I go through this, I know we might not be able to get into the details of all of the topics that we're going to cover, but I ask if there are things to flag for us. We do want this to be a series of discussions so we can come back and focus on specific issues and bring additional information to you.
Councilor Gonzalez?
Can I make a well, if you're inviting dialogue, I think we're quite chatty up here. So I just want to clarify. So, I have an understanding, and also want to make sure that the understanding is connected, but kind of with this umbrella of reducing, waste in our region, there's I see a few different tracks, right? Like, obviously, we generate the waste that we generate, that's simple. And we have a few different strategies. One is education and more sustainability, so people purchase less. Then we have, when people do purchase, how can they extend the life of those goods? And then when they throw things away, how can we divert things from the landfill? That's basically, those are the kind of the three components I see in terms of how we do that goal. So, or how we could complain. And then we have education, there's the markets, and making sure that things have a place. But would you say that, is that accurate? Or does that help to paraphrase a little bit of what you just mentioned?
In terms of our levers for advancing change?
I think we have a lot of levers, but
yeah,
I'm not trying. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it,
No,
but
I mean,
in terms of how we that overarching goal of reducing waste, I would just oversimplify it and maybe kind of put it in those categories. But anything else you can share in terms of?
I think the only one that I would add to that is shifting. This was something that Councilor Nolan mentioned in the conversation, and it's hopefully you'll start to see a thread through the conversations that we'll have around the financing of the system. So producer responsibility, that's a concept in where you start to shift the responsibility and the cost of managing a product at the end of life onto the manufacturer. So that's something that we as an organization have advocated for decades at the legislative level. Metro Paint Care is one of the earlier producer responsibility legislation that was passed that incorporates the cost of recycling paint into the purchase of the product, and then sets up organizations to help ensure that product is recycled and transferred to a higher use. So that's one example. When we talk about the Oregon Recycling Modernization Act, inherent in that is also producer responsibility. So that's fundamentally shifting how we're financing the system and how we're ensuring that things are going to a higher use. In 2022, mattress legislation was also passed, and that is same concept as Metro Paint. So that is a shift that we are working towards. There's still a cost of managing materials that end up, but how do we get them to a higher use, both for our climate goals, and we also work to incorporate our shared prosperity goals as we look at the mechanisms for doing that. So I think that's really important, and we hope to bring that out. You'll see it in the facility system plan scenarios that we're talking about and the Oregon Recycling Modernization Act as well. And we'll have some choices as Metro about what role we play in that implementation.
Excellent, thanks.
Any other, Councilor Rosenthal, and then Wong.
Thanks. Since we have this slide up, I just was, and I agree with the concepts that were made before about ways to reduce waste. One of the things we talked about at the last meeting was measuring the amount that gets re-diverted, because that's one of the biggest components. But I just wanted to add one little thought here. Under shared prosperity is that perhaps we should add the concept of appropriate training as well as good wages and benefits. As we know that the waste separation and waste control takes a lot of technology. I mean, just the paint mixing for the Metro paint is not a trivial issue. It's not something that I could do. And as we get more into plastics recycling, for example, with high-tech machines and various kinds of readers, it's going to take a certain kind of training. Even the transportation devices, the trucks, require a high level of training, as was recently evidenced by a training sequence that happened down at the Pride disposal facility down in Sherwood. So training people up to some of these higher tech jobs is also something that we should be considering and include in our shared prosperity.
I appreciate that. Absolutely. Thank you.
Councilor Wong.
Great. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for your team for incorporating a lot of our comments and feedback from the work session earlier this week. Just on the regional outcomes, I think, you heard about how excited this council is for the Road Patrol work that you all are doing and how important it is. And myself and President Peterson have the privilege of serving on the Downtown Recovery Task Force. And we're serving on the Livability Subcommittee. And I'm wondering how you're thinking about, whether that kind of like livability and making sure, we're cleaning up illegal dumping and things like that to create a more livable place. Like, where does that live in the regional outcomes that you're looking at?
Because it's not spelled out as,
It's
it's not spelled out as an outcome, even though we're doing the regional illegal dump program. And
It's a great question. I would see that falling under excellent, accessible, and resilient garbage and recycling systems. So when we look at the goals in those areas as it relates to collection services, our ideal is that we create a system where everybody has access to affordable and convenient recycling and garbage service. And in doing that, that should reduce the amount of dumped garbage in the region. We know that bulky waste, which we talked about on Tuesday, which includes, large household furniture, and if you don't have a truck or a vehicle and access to get to a self-haul station, of which there's 2 in the region, R2, that you can take that to, it becomes more difficult, and we have a patchwork of services both for single family and households. So as we look to creating better services to address some of those items, and then we should look at improving the livability in the region around services, because we know that they're inadequate, and that's something that we have aggressively been working on. So I very much see that going under improved collection services for residents. So there's a entire goal area that's in the regional waste plan that's focused on that talks about improving our service standards to make collection services better.
Great. And I think that's right, but I do think kind of in the broader public perception, the role of Metro has expanded. And Metro now plays a very critical role in beautification, livability, like those type of elements. And I just want us to be really clear and articulate about what our lane is and what our role is in that. And it's not just, managing transfer stations and waste, but like we are playing a bigger role in the civic life now.
And keeping communities clean. So that's absolutely something that we can lift up in there to make sure that that's emphasized under that outcome.
I'm just gonna tie it back. And then you can have the rest of the presentation. I think the conversation since the adoption of the plan, we have obviously been through a really interesting time period. And we saw, as you said, the amount of illegal dumping skyrocket. And it brings me back to the incentives and disincentives within our system. And the reason that we're gonna be having this conversation about these scenarios of how do you achieve the outcome, and to me, the overriding outcome is still reduction of waste to the landfill. And secondarily to that, or as equal as the environmental impacts. everything here seems like, how do you get to all of that? Right, it's the subset of the action of the outcomes, and how we set up with our rates and our programs, the incentives and disincentives to getting to those things. So I just appreciate going through this because the values are there, but then because of the pandemic, I think we've obviously are acutely aware of these incentives and disincentives. And then with the state act, yet another layer of learning that infusing that into our actions. So thank you. All right,
No,
we'll
I
move on.
appreciate that. And I hope today, so if we go on to the slide that we left off on around the levers, this will sort of show what levers we have, and it is simplified, but just to start to begin this dialogue with you to get to some of the issues that Council President Peterson mentioned. So I walk through these, our regulatory authority, our legislative advocacy, our investments through grants and sponsorships, as well as providing direct service.
And does the direct service then relate to rates?
Direct service, I mean, rates are the way that we recover the cost of our operation, so yes, in that sense. So going to the next slide, this is just intended to highlight some of the examples of how we currently apply these within our regulatory authority. Council licenses and approves new facilities. We also set base level of service for all government garbage and recycling collection programs in the region. So that relates to the conversation around bulky waste service. Within our legislative advocacy, we've talked about our work at the state level related to producer responsibility. Within investments, here are some examples of current grant programs that I believe you're all familiar with that support businesses and local communities. And lastly, we provide direct services within the region. We're talking about the cleanup services as well as our call center to answer recycling questions and operating facilities. So we want to take a moment just to zoom in to Metro's regulatory authorities to build understanding of our scope of authority within the regional waste system and how we may lever that for change. There's a strong connection between the scope of our authority and some of the scenarios that you'll be looking at about how we may or may not use that lever. And so Shane's gonna walk through that with us.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Shane Abma. I go by he and him pronouns. I primarily advise the solid waste, income tax, and supportive housing services divisions here at Metro. I'm getting over a bit of a cold, so I apologize for my voice if it cracks during this presentation. Next slide. So Metro primarily derives its solid waste authority from three sources: state statute, the Oregon Constitution, and Metro's Home Rule Charter. And I'm going to briefly discuss all three of them, just touch on them. Next slide. First, I'm going to begin with our statutory authority. So prior to having a Home Rule Charter, Metro was exclusively governed by ORS Chapter 268. If you've ever read 268, it tells what Metro can and cannot do, what our authorities were, our prohibitions, et cetera. And I'm going to zero in for the purposes of this discussion on our solid waste authority, but just generally before our home rule authority, it's important to note that we were governed by statute alone. When you look at our ORS 268.317, this is our solid waste authority, and it uses words like regulate, license, operate, franchise, and authorize. Next slide. I sometimes call this our superpowers authority. This statute was adopted by the legislature in 1977, and it was part of a bit of a grand bargain. So what we gained from this 1977 legislative adoption was flow control authority, among other things. What we lost as part of that is the authority to collect trash. That's why Metro's not in the collection business. That's reserved for cities and counties. And that was a part of this 1977 amendment. Prior to that 1977 amendment, Metro could, in theory, it never had exercised it, but it could have collected trash. We no longer have that authority. And that's why you know that we kind of deal with the transfer station level and above. So with respect to statutory flow control.
Quick question.
Yes, sure.
I have a question, maybe Councilor Wong, we just looked at each other, but how does that connect to like our household hazardous waste pickup and collection sites? So when you say collection, are you referring to hauling or?
Well, yes, hauling. The hauling. So when you hear about a hauling franchise,
yeah,
that's the garbage. That's your residential and your commercial garbage. So our collection events, we call them collection events, but the hazardous household waste kind of comes to us. We set up a spot and people bring to us, so we're not we're not driving around.
It's like a mobile transfer
Yeah,
station, basically.
well, it's mobile in a sense that we set up a site.
Yeah.
And then people come to us, so we're not in trucks driving around collecting hazardous household waste.
Fair enough.
And we've been designated to be responsible for household hazardous waste specifically as a responsibility.
Correct.
I don't know if that was your question.
Very similar. What I guess, authority do we have for the RID Patrol then? Because they're collecting trash.
Well, I'm gonna get to that, but so the RID Patrol often cleans up. So what, I don't wanna confuse the word collect to mean like you're picking something up off the ground. Collect in this terminology is you're in a vehicle, like you're a garbage truck. It's collecting waste as it drives around. Does that help? So collect, we can pick up trash, and we do. But that's different than the franchising for residential or commercial hauling of waste. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So again, I want to highlight just a few of these subsections of what I call the superpowers statute. And the flow control authority, it states that Metro may require any person or class of persons who pick up, collect, or transport solid or liquid waste to make use of, and there are three facilities, to make use of disposal, transfer, or resource recovery sites or facilities of the district. That means we can tell them that they must go to a certain MRF transfer station or landfill, or they must use these sites that are designated by the district. So you know as council that on occasion you adopt a designated facilities list, and we also have designated facility agreements. And that's where that language comes from. It's from this statute, designated by the district. So we control all facilities, all solid waste facilities within our district, and then we have designated facilities outside the district as well, in which we allow certain waste to sometimes leave our jurisdiction and go to these facilities, but they must have an agreement with us. And that's the designated facility agreement that you approve. So when they say these three facilities, just
Quick question. Sorry.
Thank you for going through the statute here. I've always said we have authority over solid waste. I've never noticed that we have authority over liquid waste. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I was hoping no one would ask it. Because
Let's rewind and I'll come to your office.
in my time here, I've asked the same question, because I don't see the difference in the statute. I think that when they said solid and liquid waste, at one point I thought, does that mean sewage? But I think that it's just a subset of solid waste.
Like this technical term of slurry.
It could be slurry. It could be a sludge, a slurry. I don't know. Maybe is Warren in the
or industrial?
Do you know Warren?
If you're going to answer, you're going to need to come forward. Sorry, for the record, we're going to need you on microphone. Thank you.
My apologies. Good morning. For the record, my name is Warren Johnson. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the policy compliance team. Work for Marta's group. I'm not going to pretend to know more than our attorney does, but definition of solid waste in our code includes liquid waste. So liquid waste, even though it is liquid, it is considered solid waste for purposes of Metro Code. So I think there might have been either some unintended distinction when that was written at the time, or it could have meant something different than what it means today. I'm not clear, but solid waste includes liquid waste. So I don't know if that helps answer the question.
But it's kind of an oxymoron that solid waste includes liquid. And so, but in any event, I think it's a subset. It's a great question. It's one I've had since I arrived.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. And I just want to point out when you're looking at this statute that there are three types of sites or facilities they're discussing here. Disposal, which we consider kind of landfills. Think of that as landfill. Transfer site, that's a transfer station. And then the resource recovery sites, we call those MRFs generally. So that's what that means. Next slide, please. So that's our flow control authority. And again, we got that in 1977. Now I'm going to talk about subsection 5, which is our permitting and rate authority. It states that Metro may regulate, license, franchise, and certify these same facilities, these different sites, that we may establish, maintain, and amend rates at all of these facilities, that we can collect license and franchise fees, and this is a big one, and that's why I've underlined it, that we can otherwise control and regulate the establishment and the operation of all public or private facilities that are solid waste related within the district. So sometimes when people say to me, can Metro do that? I say, well, have you read this subsection? Because it is so broad, otherwise control and regulate the establishment and operation of those sites. So that's a pretty big deal. Again, I want to also highlight that with respect to establishing, maintaining, and amending rates, Metro's never done that. We've never exercised that authority. In fact, some of the authority that we have in this super power statute, we have not exercised. So we have the authority, we just haven't exercised it at times. And I want to make that clear. And I also want to highlight that this is state statute. This is the authority the legislature has given us. This is not something the Metro Council adopted. This is state law.
Can we take a minute and just establish and collect license or franchise fees? You're saying we've never done that, and that would actually be something that would be included on top of whatever the cities are doing with their haulers?
Another great question. So when I read that, we've never done, it could mean that we can have fees that we charge for them to be franchised and licensed, and so I'm not sure if it means, because we do charge fees for licensing and franchising, or if it meant at one point, and if you go back in time to 1977, so you have to go back in time, it's not really the current system, there was thought that Metro might franchise some of its operations and then have franchise fees, like a telecom franchise or a street, the use of right-of-way franchising. So I think that there was some thought of that in the past that never really developed, and that's the way I have read that, President Peterson. So we have not done that. I think that there was a thought that maybe Metro would do these kinds of things in the past, but that has never played out. And I would like to do further research if that was something that council was interested in.
Franchising street fees.
Well, right-of-way, the right-of-way fees and, telecom fees, cable franchise fees.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Go ahead, Councilor Wong.
Thank you. And what does control mean in this context, in the control and regulate?
I think that, so you're going to find that some of these state statutes aren't written in plain language, right? So I think it's one of those legalese terms, control and regulate. I think you could remove the control and you could still have the regulate and it would mean the same thing. I don't know that it has a specific connotation other than some lawyer was writing it and they were throwing in more words than were necessary. That's my thought on it. I think the word regulate can encapsulate control. That's my personal, I don't know that it has any specific, without doing a legislative history research to see if there was some discussion on the word control, but I think it's just wordy.
Thank you.
Is that?
Councilor Rosenthal?
Just a quick question. As you say, this language in the ordinance is quite broad, and I could interpret it to include things that we haven't done, don't do. To what extent are we constrained by precedent? In other words, if we haven't done something, I'll give you an example. Say, control liquid wastes, for example. Site remediation, those are liquid wastes. Theoretically, you could say, well, we could control liquid waste. Now, DEQ has other authorities regarding this. But to what extent is precedent something that is going to guide any kind of future interpretations?
I think the fact that we haven't exercised power that we have doesn't create any precedent to not allowing us to do that in the future. But we could be preempted. So there may be state statutes that say Metro cannot do, a district or a local government cannot do certain things. So we are constrained in that regard. And in a minute, when I get to the home rule charter, we'll talk a little bit about how that changes the game for us as well.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any further questions on that?
Okay, this is harder to manage. In a work session where I can see everybody. Go ahead.
Right. Next slide, please. Metro may also, I'm calling this the services provided subsection. Metro may also regulate the service or services provided by contract, license, or franchise, and order modifications, additions, or extensions to the equipment, the facilities, the plan, or the services as shall be in the public interest. Again, that's a pretty broad grant of authority on what Metro could do with respect to the service or services provided, and that may come up later in your discussions regarding, for example, the system facilities plan and gaps in the system and what Metro may want to require of private facilities, or if we're looking at building new facilities. So that's also fairly broad in its language, and I don't think that we've really exercised that fully either. Next slide.
Yeah.
Can I just ask Shane to clarify one thing? When when we're looking at the statutes that talk about franchising, we're still talking about the activities post-collection? Or
Yes,
are
we don't franchise the collection of garbage. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I
Yes,
just
we
want to
do
make
not.
sure that we're clear that even if this isn't an authority and, cities franchise collections, when we say franchise, we're talking about transfer station operations and not.
That is correct. And now that you've mentioned it,
That's what I was trying to get at earlier, thank you.
yeah, now that you've mentioned it, I also want to say that I think the use, we have historically used the term franchise with respect to our transfer stations only. And there was a time when Metro was considering that it would own the station and then franchise out that work to private. And so that term kind of got stuck in there, and then we've also tried to follow the terminology found in statute. I find it confusing. I would love to see us move forward with calling them permits, because when you hear the word franchise, some people immediately think of those garbage franchises, and that's not what we do. So to say that we franchise a transfer station, it really doesn't make sense, because it doesn't really fit the connotation of what franchise has been used for local governments in the past. I think we should call them I think we should get rid of licenses and permits. It's an arbitrary distinction, we just call them permits. That's what DEQ does. I think that makes more sense, and I would love to, so I'm gonna put this plug in, thank you. So I would love to see us move towards that in the future, but that's not before us now, but I do find it confusing, and you've raised some of the confusion just from this language here and the way we use it.
Counselor Simpson.
Thank you, Council President. When you say regulate services and services provided, we add, say, reuse can to people's collection. Is that part of that situation?
Well, this is talking about regulating the services provided by, I believe, the facilities, not the individuals. Are you talking about reuse to regulating? Say it again so I'm clear,
Yeah,
Councilor
so
Simpson.
like we have our 3 can, or 4 if you count glass. If we added another can, another color code for reuse, and it picks up once a month or something like that, does that fall under that as well?
Well, I would say that it falls under our authority, whether it falls under that specific provision or not. And and as your attorney, I'm gonna say that we have a lot of authority. So there's, unless the state has told us we can't do it, I generally think we can move forward in a lot of these areas. But whether it falls under that specific statutory scheme or our home rule charter, may be something I would.
Are you thinking of, to be more specific, if under the city's franchise, that you would add an element similar to the company Ridwell?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and although we don't collect garbage, we do have a role in playing what is collected.
We can set
How
collection
frequency,
service
yes,
standards.
service standards.
So what is the frequency? What are the materials collected? We have the ability to set that, which I think makes it even more confusing because we don't control collection, but we can control what is the service level standards. For this statutory item, I think a good example would be self-haul. That's something that we don't currently require of private facilities, but if I understand correctly, under this statutory requirement, this is something that we could require private facilities to do. And so again, you'll see that this dot connecting to the system facilities plan as well when you think about your scope of options to manage materials in the region.
Exactly, thank you, Marta. And just again, to highlight some of this language, not only the service and services provided, but to order modifications, additions, or extensions to the equipment or the facilities. It's just very broad language, and so I think this is a great discussion for council to have regarding as we moving forward, especially with the system facilities plans and other kind of overview. Next slide. So what I have just discussed so far is embedded in ORS Chapter 268, which I mentioned earlier, governs Metro specifically. There are other general solid waste statutory authority that we are a part of. For example, ORS Chapters 459 and 459A, they govern solid waste management and recycling generally, but they're not specific to Metro. However, Metro is mentioned in those statutes, and we do have certain authority and requirements found in them. For purposes of Metro's authority with respect to local governments, I just want to highlight the one statute that's a very big one as well, and it's one that, that leads into this regional service standards. Next slide. So I sometimes call this the no conflict provision. And again, be forewarned, this is not in plain language, but we're going to muddle through it anyway. So this is a statute that, well, let's just read it. No ordinance, order, regulation, or contract that affects solid waste management shall be adopted by a local government unit if that ordinance, order, regulation, or contract conflicts with a solid waste management plan or program adopted by a metropolitan service district, and we're the only one in the state, that's us, and approved by DEQ, or any of the ordinances or regulations that Metro Council adopts under that plan. So that's our waste reduction plan and our regional waste plan. And basically what this state statute says is that once we've adopted that plan, our waste reduction plan and our regional waste plan, once we've adopted it and DEQ has approved it, then local governments in our region cannot conflict with that. They can't have an order, an ordinance, a regulation, or a contract that is in conflict. So that's kind of a big deal, and that is the authority that we often rely upon when we're doing our regional service standards. It's also what we've used for, say, the business recycling requirements, the business food waste requirements, things of that nature, and it's primarily for us, it's embedded in our Metro Code Chapter 5.15. Any questions about that statute?
And just to clarify, the regional service standard is something that we do have adopted in Metro Code that sets collection service levels for single-family and multifamily households for garbage and recycling. It also includes our business recycling requirement and the food waste, the food scraps recycling requirement as well.
Any questions? Next slide, please. So we've talked about our statutory authority, and then we're just very quickly going to move on to the next two, our constitutional authority. In 1991, the voters, and these were, by the way, I should make this clear, in 1991, there was a statewide ballot measure, statewide, it was not just local, asking whether Metro should be allowed to have a home rule charter. And so this went throughout the entire state, and the voters of Oregon passed that measure. And this gave Metro the authority to have a home rule charter, and that's found in, so that amended the Constitution. So we are mentioned in the Constitution as having the authority to have a home rule charter. So now we have the authority, what's next? Next slide, please. And then what happened is the following year, the voters from the region, from the Metro jurisdiction, Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties, actually adopted a home rule charter for Metro. And the state legislature has acknowledged that our home rule charter is an independent grant of authority. So we have statutory authority, and we talked about those superpower statutes. We also have a home rule charter. And I'd like to just to talk about the importance of that. When you have a home rule charter, we were no longer beholden to the state legislature telling us what we could and couldn't do. With a home rule charter, we can do what we want to do unless preempted by state statute. Unless the legislature says you can't do it, then we can. So this was a pretty big deal in 1992 for us. And I also want to just note, for just edification purposes, that every city in Oregon has a home rule charter. Some counties do, some don't. Some counties are just governed by state statute. And Metro is now the only non-city, non-county government in the entire state of Oregon that has a home rule charter. So we're a bit unique in that regard. And what did our charter give us? Well, with respect to solid waste specifically, it gave us general authority to dispose of solid waste. That term is not defined in the charter, so that's a pretty broad statement. We have authority over disposal of solid waste. It also gave us some specific authority regarding solid waste. It said that we can acquire, develop, maintain, and operate solid waste facilities. And of course, you know we have a couple of transfer stations. And finally, it gave us just general jurisdiction over any other matter of metropolitan concern. And again, just for some edification, Metro Council, to my knowledge, has invoked the matter of metropolitan concern 3 times in our history since 1992. And one was with transit-oriented development, one was with affordable housing, and then our most recent was supportive housing services. So those are the three times in since 1992. So that's our home rule authority. Again, it's a big deal because it means that we're not necessarily governed just by state statute alone. And I also want to just again state that that was voter approved. The voters gave us that authority. And with that, that concludes my presentation on Metro Solid Waste Authority, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any other questions on authority? No? Counselor Gonzalez.
I mean.
Oh, and then Lewis.
You want to go first, Counselor? Mine's not that serious. Okay, all right, cool. Well, now that I have the mic, Well, 1992 was a great year. A lot of a lot of important things happened. So this is why I didn't want to go first. But I mean, I want to. It is remarkable, though, the kind of the civic spirit and infrastructure. I mean, if we have any historians or institutional memory folks, what was special about that time? Aside from other important things, that really helped Metro, grow its presence and its authority. Is there anything that you might know or that you could share? Just genuine curiosity
On why it was moving towards the home rule charter?
Yeah, I mean the fact that in the 3 counties it was supported, it was passed, and in the statewide as well. I mean, that sounds pretty remarkable.
I think it is remarkable. I don't know that it would happen today.
Exactly. I didn't want to say those words, but
yeah.
What were the right conditions at that time for an organization like Metro, which we've acknowledged is unique statewide, but also nationally, to kind of cement some of that presence?
I'm not an authority on it, Councilor Gonzalez, but I would say that I think at that time, there was just this growing recognition that we had regional problems, that Metro's home rule charter would be helpful, that relying on state statute was cumbersome, because every time Metro needed to do something as it was growing in stature and what its responsibilities were or what it wanted to do, it had to go to the legislature. It had to get a bill passed. And, as all of you know, that's not always easy. So allowing us to have a home rule charter then it took away that need to always go to the legislature to get things done. And of course, it went to the voters. I mean, so the whole state said, yeah, you can have one if the voters will approve it in that region. And then remarkably, the voters did approve that. So I think it's a wonderful thing that the voters said, we entrust Metro enough that we're going to give you a home rule charter, and we know what that means.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Just on a side note, I think there are a series of individuals in our community that we should be bringing in for lunch and learn. That actually wrote this, and to get that kind of intent of when these things were put before the voters, whether that be a Mike Burton or a Rick Gustafson, and they would know all of the other players that are still part of our community, that it would be nice to have that on the record and get that in video and transcript. And I know we have some history on our website, but I think it would be important to just kind of hear and have a conversation of what was the intent and what was it that was so special about 1973 in the Oregon Land Use Planning Program. What set of circumstances in the 90s was causing this? And I can only guesstimate, so I won't go into it, but having heard some of the stories. But from MERC, the creation of MERC and how that came about, to how these authorities came about, I mean, I think we all have questions.
Yeah.
And what was the intent, and where are we now, and what has changed since then? So I think that would be great. All right. Councilor Lewis. And then Rosenthal.
Sure, thank you so much. So I guess just to continue with the soft history lesson, if you could let us know a little bit more about preemptions that have been suggested or fulfilled by the state legislature, since I believe that the legislature has taken a kind of partnership role with us in many cases, but they are often want to preempt local government when there's a hot topic. So are we preempted under state statute from anything, or have there been attempts?
With respect to solid waste, the collection is a big one. So Metro can't collect. I mean, we're basically preempted from that, collecting garbage. Things come up on occasion about preemption for us, but they haven't passed. So I will say also, though, that the home rule charter is a big deal, because even there was a concern for many years that folks who didn't like Metro or didn't like our solid waste authority may go to the legislature and knock some of that superpower statute down, repeal it or soften it. But once we got a home rule charter, that's harder for them to do then, because I think that we have a lot of the authority that you find in that state statute, you could arguably say exists in a home rule charter now. So even if the statute were wiped clean, I would not concede that we still don't have a lot of that same authority given our home rule charter, which is much harder to knock down a home rule charter.
Great, thank you.
Harry, did you have something to add?
Thank you, President Peterson. No, I was just agreeing that, I think that I guess one part I would say that is sort of an element of our home rule charter, because we are a regional collaborative government. It does contain in our home rule charter the existence of MPAC, the Metropolitan Advisory. I'm going to actually.
Metropolitan Planning.
Planning Advisory Committee, thank you. And through that process, I was like, I can't unpack my acronyms today. Through that process, that really is where we have a conferral, relationship with other local governments and entities within our region. So it is, I would say, what's unique about our home rule charter is it both recognizes that regional context of other governments, as well as sort of the direct call by voters to say there are regional needs that we want a government that's responsive to us directly for, and not just have those grants of legislative authority come through the state legislature. So that's part of the significance that I would say is both unique and I don't, maybe a little bit too linguistic or literary here, but kind of an interwoven fabric of our relationship between local government in the region and directly the voters of our region as well.
Councilor Rosenthal?
Thank you, President Peterson. As you point out, these are somewhat broad things and have a lot of implications that not all have been explored. There's two criteria, it seems, that are applied. One on the legislature is of the public interest. That everything is tied to, we can do it if it's in the public interest. And the second one is in the Home Rule Charter, where it says of metropolitan concern. So is there any clarification of either of those concepts? What do we mean by metropolitan, and how do we evaluate? If we tried to do something that somebody objected to, how do we evaluate those?
Metropolitan concern is not defined in the Constitution, and that's the same language that you find with these statutory counties. It says that they can do certain things of county concern. So it's not defined, but I do believe if challenged, we would need to say that it is something that has a metropolitan impact. For example, if there was some project that was just located in East Portland that we thought we really wanted to get our noses in that, and we proclaimed it to be a matter of metropolitan concern, we may face a challenge. Fortunately, the 3 times that we've invoked that, they really truly have been metropolitan issues, and so there hasn't even been, I think, a hint of a challenge. But it is something that we've looked at and thought about and wondered, if challenged, what will we need to show? And I think that the courts would give the council quite a bit of deference in its findings. That's why we try and put findings in those ordinances as to why something is of a metropolitan concern. Does that answer your question? And the public interest, that's, we can make arguments why something is or isn't. I mean, people can challenge it, but again, courts are going to give us deference if this council makes findings and has testimony as to why something's in a public interest. I feel usually pretty confident that this council would prevail if challenged on something like that.
I can think of many issues that are of metropolitan concern, but I won't speculate.
That you can or cannot think of something?
I can.
Oh, yes, yeah.
We've already invoked a lot of them, yes. Go ahead, Marta.
We do have a little bit more to our presentation. I definitely can bring Shane back. It's a really good conversation and dialogue, but would love to step back into it, and we can absolutely circle back for more questions if we may move forward. Okay. And if you're able to pull back up the slide deck, that would be great. So the next portion of our presentation is in part to try and operationalize what our authority and the other levers that I mentioned look like in practice. And so I want to start with a bit of a wider lens, and I'll give us a moment to get to that slide. So if you go to the next one. I am very much a visual person, so this is our first attempt at trying to visualize how we are taking actions within the current system to leverage change. On Tuesday, we touched on the life cycle framework as a framework to identify opportunities to reduce the impacts through the life of a product. So in looking at this graphic, we have the levers down at the bottom that we just touched on, and you can see when we look at the life cycle, we heavily rely on legislative advocacy to facilitate change with the design and manufacturing, and this is a space where we have influence rather than authority in the system. Within consumption and waste prevention, we rely on investments and direct services to promote behavior change. And at the end of life, you can see the dots where we currently apply our authority to minimize the impacts and ensure safe disposal of materials. So just to get a sense of where we are placing those levers for change within this wider system. Next slide. This next slide really zooms in on the disposal part of the life cycle that includes the garbage and recycling system. Here you can see where we focus our authority on the transfer, processing, and disposal of waste that Shane just covered. We have also made investments to strengthen our reuse, recycling, and composting parts of the system. And lastly, we have areas that we provide direct service that we've touched on today again, our education. We have Metro Paint that actually does collect, sort, recycle, and sell paint, and our RID Patrol program. So we'll just pause there for a moment. Okay. Next slide. So now I want to shift to try and connect these actions to the current levels of investment within our budget. This slide is from our budget presentation this last spring, and it provides our operating budget by our core areas of work. And I want to walk through each of these and just ask for Council President and Council to take notes on any areas within this where you do have additional questions or you'd like to dive deeper in as we look to development of next year's budget. Next slide. As you may recall, the garbage and recycling operation makes up the majority of our overall operating budget. This is also the area within our budget that we have the most fixed costs as it relates to staffing and the two major contracts to operate the transfer station. And work in this area is focused on direct service provisions. We have conducted past studies that have affirmed the importance of having a hybrid system and providing the most potential to reduce system costs and level the playing field for smaller private firms. This slide shows the breakdown and allocation of funding across the facilities as well as our asset management, safety, and environmental compliance. Both transfer stations are funded by the solid waste fee, and our household hazardous waste program is funded by our regional system fee. As I shared in my budget presentation, positions approved in last year's budget have enabled us to establish a new division to address safety and environmental compliance, which really focuses on our priority for climate resilient and safe operations. And looking ahead as a part of the system's facilities plan for future improvements, we'll need to determine a long-term strategy for maintaining our existing and future assets. Next slide. Services and community investments captures most of our direct service programs and investments efforts. So this slide shows a breakdown of our resources allocated to each activity. So just starting at the top, grants and services represents the regional refresh program that we just established as a long-term program in the region to support local governments and communities. This also includes the investment and innovation grant program. The waste prevention and education leadership includes our school education program, so that helps us meet state requirements for delivering education and outreach to communities and residents. It also includes Metro's own youth internship program. The next section is really the paint recycling is essentially the Metro Paint budget and what it takes to operate that program. And finally, cleanup is our RID cleanup services as well. So just to give you a sense of what the allocation looks like across our program service areas. And as you look at these are all programs that are funded by our regional system fee. In the last 2 years, our priorities have really been to maintain our current programs. We have not done any significant additions with the exception of our RID Patrol program. We have seen increased costs in our Metro Paint program, but that is in large part due to our decision to transfer from temporary staff to permanent Metro staff. We've made progress with our Metro Paint program in advancing workforce equity and making improvements to operations. The program is launching an RFP this fall to update its business model and develop a strategy to increase cost recovery while meeting its recycling, workforce, and community service goals. And this, as well as, again, the system facilities plan, will help inform our department's approach to modernization and technical improvements for our facilities. But I see maybe questions, so I'm happy to pause or go back.
Could you go back one slide? The funding, I was looking for the funding way back when you showed the services we provide. I started thinking about, okay, so how is everything getting paid for?
It's a great question.
And so you had the note on this last slide, but you didn't have the note on this slide.
Good observation.
And the question that was generated back with the first slide of all the services, the regulatory portion, and how that's paid for.
So I want to address, if you go to the next slide, why I did not include the funding. This is a little bit fuzzy, so I want to unpack it. So our Metro Center operations in Metro South are strictly paid for by the solid waste fee. There are portions within safety, asset management, and environmental compliance that are also paid for out of the solid waste fee to support those two specific facilities. For household hazardous waste, that is paid for out of the regional system fee, and within those two supporting programs, that portion comes from the regional system fee. When we had conversations last spring and we heard from the private transfer stations around concerns of us having a blended reserve, starting this fiscal year, we have segregated out those costs in the reserve, so everything is very clean in terms of how we're accounting the spending for our operations and being able to show directly back to the regional system fee and solid waste fee.
Okay.
And then you had a question around the regulatory?
Regulatory.
So if you go to next slide, and then the next slide. So this encompasses our regulatory, our compliance and standards program within this. With regards to compliance, that section there, the 2.1 million is what we have allocated for that program. It's primarily program staff that we have that does the inspections at the transfer stations, as well as authorizations, licenses, and collection of fees. So this really encompasses the work that we do, both the planning and partnerships with local government. So that first line item there, the direct funding, that's funding that we provide directly to local governments to help them support their meeting those both state and regional waste reduction requirements. I mentioned compliance, and then within policy and planning, this is much of the work that we do that's focused on collaborating with local governments in implementing the regional waste plan, and also the work that we do at the state legislative level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think where I'm going in my head is in need of a chart that lists these out by what are the services that are being provided under each of the fees? And then the second related is which services could be provided somehow else
Okay.
under a different fee in order to have the conversation as we move closer to that conversation of how are we incentivizing, disincentivizing, and how is it affecting the industry? Just so I have it in my head, that visual.
We can absolutely do that.
Thank you. Counselors? Counselor Lewis?
Can you say more about direct funding to local government?
So
Because don't we have some of the non-regional system fee that goes there?
Can you repeat the last part again?
So this whole blue circle is regional system fee. I thought some of the other funds were the local government.
The funds that so this whole program is funded by the regional system fee. Every year, local governments receive per capita grant funding that we directly provide to them, and that comes from the regional system fee.
Do local governments receive funds through us that are not regional system fee?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Because Brian Kennedy's here as well, so I can lean on him. The solid waste fee is strictly for the cost, recovering the cost of the transfer station operations. So having that separate.
Councilors Brian Kennedy, Chief Financial Officer, he, him pronouns. I think the only nuance I would add to that is community enhancement fees that go to local governments. Those are not part of the regional system fee and not part of our solid waste fee. They are a separate bucket that we collect on behalf and then distribute.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I had my attorney whispering in my ear as well that I forgot to mention the community enhancement fee.
No, it's okay,
So,
Counselor Gonzalez.
How about the I&I grants? Or did
the I&I grants are a regional system fee program. When they were first started, they were funded out of our reserves because we had significant funds in our reserves, but went down dramatically as a result of the pandemic and not raising our fees for a year, and it was moved to be as a part of our regional system fee.
Okay, yeah, but remind me of the structure of the I&I. Can local governments apply for that as well, or is it private entities?
That is private entities,
Okay.
nonprofit organizations and businesses.
Okay, all right, great, thanks.
Our regional refresh program, though, is something that local governments apply for, and then community enhancement grants, as you know, go to local governments in most instances. Okay.
Okay.
So I ran through this a little bit quickly, but I'm happy to go back to any of the other ones around our budget and allocations. We will put together that chart that Council President mentioned. So I did want to zero in on if you go to the next slide, Councilor Lewis touched on bulky waste service at Tuesday's meeting, and this is really a key project and an area that we're proposing for further council engagement in November, but I wanted to share some additional information today. This project is a first step at implementing the regional waste plan action that you see listed here on the slide for the provision of bulky waste. As we've discussed, Metro has the ability to set collection standards in the region. Cities and counties provide bulky waste through their haulers. The current services are different depending on where you live in the region. This is really results in a patchwork of services that can be inconsistent and confusing. It really just depends on where you live as to what level of service you received. Last year, we kicked off the bulky waste policy project that includes both research and pilots, and we're currently in the second phase of that, where we are collecting data on different types of models that we may use, with a focus on starting with multifamily first. We are partnering with Clackamas, Washington counties and the cities of Beaverton, Gresham, and Portland. As I mentioned, this project started first with multifamily. With regards to single family, the project team, which is composed of all of those cities and counties, is in the process of deciding whether or not a pilot is needed for single family. If the team decides a pilot is not needed, Metro could choose to require local governments to establish standards for that sector sooner. And we recognize the desire for a more accelerated implementation of these service standards, so that is part of the priorities that we are proposing for council discussion this fall. So I wanted to make that note here. Next slide. So the last part of the presentation is to seek your direction on initial priorities to guide policy development for work this year and identify areas of discussion for investment to inform next year's budget. And again, this is initial conversation. Next slide. So this just captures the items under the levers that we discussed earlier. Under our regulatory authority, we are seeking advancing a discussion with council on rate transparency that we talked about on Tuesday. We are also seeking a conversation with council on the development of the bulky waste policy project. Under investments and direct services, these are areas we are seeking additional direction from council to guide levels of investment for next year's budget. We've discussed in briefings getting council direction on a timeline for an assessment of the restructure of the Investment and Innovation Grant Program. We're also interested in engaging with council on the implementation of the RID workforce program and the levels of investment within this program. Next, we are seeking additional direction in investments in Metro Central to support food processing, including a depackager to reduce contamination and material. This is a project that began before the pandemic and one that we would like to bring back for council consideration. And lastly, we are interested in beginning work on better aligning our community enhancement grant program with the regional waste plan goals, including clarifying goals, outcomes, and performance measures for that program. And finally, under direct services, we would like to discuss with council approaches for further expanding household hazardous waste collection services. We've done a lot of work this year and are increasing our target, but we'd like to have an additional conversation with you about additional solutions that we could look at to meet the needs of our jurisdictional partners that really live far away from our two permanent facilities. So again, these are just initial areas that we're seeking council consideration for moving forward and any additional items that you would like us to include in this list. So we had a couple of discussion questions, and I will turn it back to Council President Peterson.
Oh, I thought you had the questions.
Oh.
There we are.
If you pull back up the slide
Yeah, if we
deck,
could bring
there's
it back.
questions up, yeah.
Okay, I guess the first question is to go back to the second to last slide. Council, under these proposals, is this what you had expected? Anything else? I guess my question is just beyond the rate transparency. I think the conversation that we wanted to have this year going in is the one that the industry had brought up.
Yes.
So where does that fall?
For around the,
how do our fees impact the industry? Are they fair? What things are getting paid for, by what, when?
so I believe a part of the fee policy task force will also be engaging industry on Metro's overall fee policy, and so it will be a part of that conversation.
I just didn't see it on here.
So, yes, thank you for recognizing that. The items that I did not include on this were the ones that we touched on on Tuesday that were the current projects underway. So that work is already kicking off, the fee policy task force. We're also conducting budget roundtables with with industry as well as nonprofit organizations and local governments to help inform fee and budget development. And I also think that will be a part of the system facilities plan. So thank you so much for highlighting that.
Okay, thanks. Like, where to go? Counselors, rate transparency under regulatory authority and bulky waste service levels. Any issues, concerns, comments? Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam President. I have two areas that come to mind that I'm just wondering that have occurred. One is there any potential or need to do a greater evaluation of self-haul? As you noted, we only have 2 facilities, whether that would increase the amount of recycle, reuse, or something like that, whether that is an area that we should be looking at in more detail, or regulating the private haulers for self-haul. In some cases they can, some cases they can't. And the other one, and this goes back to about a year and a half ago, specialty wastes, as you know, Ridwell caused quite a stir and a lot of confusion. Is that an area that we should be looking at different? The counties responded differently and set up different regulatory things. There different waste haulers have different regulations. We have the authority to require some standardization in that regard. Is that something that we should be looking at? Is that something, there were a lot of personal comments from people in areas that weren't covered as well. How come I can't get this service? You know, it's a costly service. I'm not sure it's that good, but nonetheless, there was a lot of public interest.
Thank you. That's a great questions and items to flag. I believe both of those will be part of the conversations. The first one with regards to self-haul as a part of the system facilities plan and looking at different options for how, we know that that's a known gap in the region.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the scenarios that you will be reviewing, consider the different ways that we could address that gap, whether it be through service or construction of new facilities. The second item with regards to the collection of recyclables, would be part of the conversation that we're having around the Oregon Recycling Modernization Act. So I believe as a part of those conversations, we'll be able to get to the items that you raised.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I know that there's the kind of sideline of the other projects that are in motion, including the facilities research. But I'm curious, we've had conversations around a reuse collaborative warehouse, and I'm curious why it's not in this investment list as well. It's a model and a partnership in addition to being a facility.
That's a great question and something that we can add to this list for consideration. I think the system facilities plan is looking long-term. Reuse is absolutely a component of that and possible ways that we can help support infrastructure to support those efforts, but I think there is also the short term where we can have a conversation about how to start work on that sooner. So that's something we can add to this for discussion.
Thank you.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the business food scraps aspect. There's just have like little pieces of information from the last few years. We kind of had a plan. The pandemic stalled that plan. There were a lot of other kind of parallel projects in partnership with the City of Portland and the food slurry kind of big machine building that was then stalled as well, and just kind of timelines. And so I know that when Metro first launched the effort with the 3 counties to lead this business, this food scrap program, it was a really big lift and there's a lot of energy, a lot of conversation. I feel like the updates or my general consciousness of where that is has really tapered. But I think as that moves forward and as we get more assertive about our enforcements, we're going to be hearing about the small businesses, the restaurants in our communities, and the city pointing them to Metro or us back, however that works, right? So can you just generally give us a snapshot on that?
On the food scrap,
Yes.
Absolutely. When council adopted this prior to the pandemic, it had multiple components. One is you mentioned 2 of them related to the food scraps recycling requirement that affects businesses. Another component of that was building out processing capacity within the region, as well as supporting markets. This had started to unfold, the implementation of this food scraps requirement right before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit, all food waste generating businesses stopped generating food because they were closed. So we paused the rollout of that program. So we are delayed. So when we pick that back up, we're working on the implementation of the food scraps requirement now in a phased approach to generators. We are also continuing to look at building out processing capacity. One of the key components was adding a depackager to Metro Central to help clean up the material to get it to markets and provide additional capacity for food processing. When we picked that project back up, the cost of installing that depackager had doubled. And the landscape had changed. And so over the last year, we've done additional research on what do the markets look like, how much food is being generated, is this still a worthwhile investment? There was also at that time discussions with the City of Portland about partnering to send some of our food waste to their anaerobic digester, and we picked back up those conversations. The landscape certainly has changed, and our intent is to come back to the council to update you on the work, and then share the new information that we have, and then get further direction around what level of investment council wants to continue to make.
Okay, excellent. So the proposed that bullet point kind of covers the umbrella of, because and my understanding is that the city did move forward with building the digester, right? Or they're in the process of doing that, right? So
yes,
we're essentially part of the feeding the supply into the slurry machine and those conversations that you're saying. Okay, and I remember that the implementation for the actual requirements were delayed and phased. Do you, off the top of your mind, do you remember those? It's okay if you don't. You could always send them to us. But was it like October, November of this year? They would begin to slowly trickle in, if I remember one of the charts correctly.
I'm going to call on our Policy and Compliance Director, Pam Peck, who can provide some additional information on that as she oversees that program.
Thanks. Thank you, Pam. Also, thank you.
Had a little COVID exposure this week. Good afternoon. My name's Pam Peck, and I work on the Policy and Compliance team. And yes, we delayed the implementation of the phases by a year. And we're just now, so business groups 1 and 2 came in at the same time. And business group 1 are all the largest generators, like the grocery stores, which were all actually are already participating really well. Then we get to the next big set of like restaurants, and then the next phase we're headed to are the smaller generators who generate this. And also schools are going to be also part of the last phase because we wanted to be sure that schools had all the technical assistance they needed. That'd be mostly their commissary kitchens, because remember, this is all back of the house requirement for separation. And we also support the local government, in addition to that per capita funding that was mentioned, through the regional system fee. We're supporting the technical assistance staff at the local government who provide that direct assistance to the businesses, so the businesses have that support to them. So that is still going on, and that will continue until they get all the businesses and schools in, and that will continue actually after the deadline, so they continue to have support. And then you'll have to look at future funding around that as part of your budget discussions.
Great, okay, so that kind of leads to my last question on that. But so when, I mean, infrastructure is such a broad term, you know, so like infrastructure, like, are we referring to like the actual like machines that digest and, you know, create the slurry, capture the methane, blah, blah, blah? Or are we talking about like the infrastructure of the process that helps with the TA, the education, enforcement? And I mean, I think this is an area where the council does have a lot of interest and passion with making sure that doesn't go into the landfill. So again, just great work, and curious to learn about how in this upcoming fiscal year we'll learn a little bit more about that.
Appreciate that. Food waste is really key to our climate goals. I appreciate you asking to unpack that term. In this instance, it's very specific to investments that we want to make at Metro Central and being able to add a depackager to that facility. We are looking at potential grant funding opportunities. The EPA has capital grants out to support this type of work, but also want to have the availability to consider this level of investment through our own budget, because we see great opportunity and benefit in ensuring that material is cleaner, because that further supports our local markets that process that material. So bringing back to you, but definitely can have a wider conversation around larger infrastructure investments if that's something council would like to do.
I thought that was part of
the system facilities plan
Yes,
as well.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
food waste is, the processing capacity is included in that, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. Who else do we have? Counselor Wong.
Oh, great, thank you, Madam President. Let's see, so I wanted to ask a question around like how WPEZ is collaborating and advancing kind of Metro's goals and objectives more collectively. And, you know, through like the direct service area or in the investment areas, especially around the investment and innovation grants, like, is there a sense of, you know, collaboration and partnership with the housing department, for example? Like a few months ago, we had some of our nonprofit partners from Community Warehouse and the Reuse Center, and they talked about challenges about, you know, delivering their services that kind of like hit upon some different kind of goals and objectives that Metro has as an agency. So I'm wondering how, you know, that's being thought of, and like how, I guess, kind of just going to my earlier question, like how is WPEZ kind of seeing itself and integrating itself into being part of a solution for a lot of our regional problems? I know y'all are doing a great job with the waste system, but like what are the other pieces that we can work on collaboratively to tackle some of our shared problems?
It's a great question. Partnerships is essential to the work that we're doing within implementation of the regional waste plan. With regards to reuse, there have been a number of reuse organizations that have received grants as a result of the Investment and Innovation Grant Program that has helped support local efforts. They are also organizations that we had a roundtable with this summer to talk about how can we better incorporate your input into priorities that we bring to council and our budget development. Part of our desire to bring the Investment and Innovation Grant Program to council and consider restructuring it is to be responsive to some of the comments that we've heard around the grant amounts being limiting to what organizations can achieve in needing higher levels of investment to be able to make the change that they're interested in. So part of being good partners is having ongoing conversations and making sure that we're including them as we look at our priorities that we bring before you. They have also been deeply engaged in the system facilities plan, and we've had a number of workshops, you'll hear about that on Tuesday, with them, and they've helped craft the solutions to address gaps that we have in the system that you're going to see in the different scenarios development. And I think Councilor Lewis flagging this as an item for further discussion for council for next year will also give us an opportunity to bring that feedback to you to consider where council might want to make different investments within, direct service or investments within the scope of services and programs that we have.
Great, thanks. I think my intent really is just like making sure that there is collaboration and communication with other metro departments, and hopefully that we're greater than the sum of our parts.
Go ahead.
If I may, I thank you for bringing this up, Councilor Wong. I think that there is a lot of opportunity, not just between the Housing Department and WPES, but sort of as a whole, to talk about Metro's role in housing, both retaining, building, planning for new housing. I had a wonderful conversation with the executive director of the Rebuilding Center not too long ago, and we happened to be having lunch in my neighborhood, in the Elliott neighborhood that has been highly gentrified. And on the one hand, we want density, we want housing, but we also want to retain the natural affordable housing that we have in our neighborhoods, and to do that, we need to repair and reuse and create opportunities for that. So I think it's such a rich and nuanced conversation that goes beyond WPES, but kind of all recognizing our part in the system that is having some consequences that we want, like more housing, but also some consequences that we don't, like a loss of prosperity and intergenerational wealth when the existing housing is not able to be maintained and kept. So just wanted to share those thoughts because I think it's a great point and a very rich area for us to explore.
Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Council President.
Swear to God, you all need to change your hands because the hand color.
Is it
Because
too
I
dark?
cannot see them with the background being the same. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's all good. Thank you. I think about, and I thank you for all the good work y'all are doing. I think about this slide that I'm gonna roll us back just a ways, but that first slide addressing the full life cycle and the tracks in between the circles. I oftentimes think about the ongoing engagement with our frontline workers. And could you give me an overall summary, because I am, I don't necessarily know what's going on the front lines, like around worker safety, morale, and the experience at Metro as frontline workers, and some of the gaps that exist in terms of like how we engage with folks, how we make things a little bit better to work at Metro, and how we can add it to this list, because I feel like we should also invest in ourselves so that we can open up opportunities for others to come in and work at Metro as well.
I really appreciate that comment, and that is an investment that we've made within our department with establishing our own equity, culture, and engagement team. A lot of our efforts have been decentralized and different people owning that, and we really wanted to ensure that we had resources allocated to addressing the items that you just mentioned. And I actually think Rob's here, so I'm gonna invite him to come up and also speak to that, because he's done a lot of the work in engaging our staff.
Thank you, Council, and thank you, Councilor Simpson, for that wonderful question. Rob Nathan, I go by he, him pronouns, Equity, Culture, and Engagement Manager in the Office of the Director in WPES. I think we're at the beginning stages of our journey, really addressing the disparate experiences that workers have at Metro, from those who work here at headquarters and those who work on the front lines with their physical bodies every day in the elements. I think many of you have asked wonderful questions today about how this all has to do with waste reduction. And I think we're still having conversations internally as an agency around our authority and our ability to spend and invest in workers. And so I really encourage you all to unpack that conversation and have some conversations around what is our policy decisions around how we spend money, how we spend our fees, and how we spend those fees on investing in the people who work on the front lines. We've, on my team, have been able to make a lot of progress to date by providing some internal services to employees. But I think there are more conversations to be had, as Marisa has pointed out, our opportunity that we have to think about affordable housing and those workers we have at Metro that struggle to pay rent, right, for example. In the interim, I'm really proud to say that my team has been able to work with individuals, helping them navigate the barriers they face on a daily basis. I think that Metro does do a really great job of paying livable wages in comparison to other employers. But we know as a region we're behind. Just because we're at the top doesn't mean that we can't do better. And I'm just being very frank with you on that. So I appreciate the question, and I'm happy to talk about some of the roles and responsibilities across our team that we do here in this department. But I do say there's a lot more work for us to do collaboratively as an agency, because we can only do so much as a department.
Thank you, Nathan. Rob, excuse me. I would like to at least offer, if we could add in this space of investment, how we take care of our people. And study that.
Great, thank you. 100%. Councilor Lewis, sorry. And then Councilor Wong.
Yeah, thinking through what happens every day at our transfer station brings to mind a conversation I had recently around the work that gets done by our artists and residents. And I think that their program, I personally find a lot of value in it, and I do think that we hit a lot of our goals with it. However, it does bring up the fact that we go through a lot of rigmarole to get 5 people safety trained on how to glean. I'd like to add to the conversation if we want to make that investment more broadly so that more people can do gleaning work, and so that we can actually embed that into our staffing process and adequately compensate folks for what it takes to get people in.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you. Did you have something else you wanted? Okay, I guess I just wanted to round this out because I'm going to come back and I'm going to be a broken record for the next however many years. I think all of this is good. I think they're all conversations we need to have, but as we were talking, it dawned on me that there's a parallel to what I'm the most worried about in terms of, it's not just the transportation demand management, it's the SDC problems that we have on the housing side is where I'm gonna draw the parallel. And where I need to understand how we're charging for all of these things and where we're charging and when we're charging and how that then impacts the entirety of the system. So it's not, I want to be clear that there is still a need to find funding for these programs, whether it's our regulatory or the public good. But I feel like we have set up a system that is disincentivizing, just like SDCs have done in our housing market. They're being charged at the wrong time and being funded out of the wrong way in order to get the results that we need right now in the marketplace. So that's the best parallel I can come up with in my head to describe what I'm feeling and hearing, both from the industry and from our actual outcomes that we're getting, is that we may need to think kind of out of the box about how we charge those fees. And I'm not sure, again, you've done a good job of our general authority, but I'd like to dig into how we're charging these things so that they are getting us what we need in order to meet that public good, but aren't having other ramifications throughout the system. Thank you. If
We would
that
really
helps. If that
appreciate
helps.
it.
I don't know if
That
SDCs is a good example for you because you're not in the industry.
I'm gonna
but-
have to look that up, but I will. But we would appreciate having a deeper conversation with council
Yeah.
as a part of these touch points, specifically around what you just articulated.
So not to, because of Measure 5 and 50, cities are not able to charge for their capital needs in ways that they, somebody's hacked into the system. So in order to pay for growth in the system, for sewer, water, parks, the cities charge a fee on the developer of new growth. To be able to build out an intersection, to be able to grow a new park, to be able to provide water and sewer. Where they are charging that up front has caused a lot of developments to not be able to move forward. And so there are cities that are now saying you can pay it on the back end and it can be part of a loan, or we will waive it completely if it's for low income, or we will tier it based on the type of development that you're building. So is there a different way to think about what is right now our regional waste fee in terms of when it's getting charged, how it's getting charged, what are the other options? And that's the conversation I want to see on the other side of this, because while we need to meet all of these needs, I'm just afraid that we aren't thinking out of the box on how to do that.
Thank you.
It may be that there's no other option. The no build is always an option, but I think the point is just that just came to mind, is that's the only way I can explain how I'm feeling about the regional waste fee.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? No. Thank you, Marta. Much appreciated. Thank you, Shane. We have a lot to talk about yet coming up, but this is a good basis for the conversation. I appreciate it. All right. COO communication.
Hello again, counselors. Just wanted to bring your attention to a few upcoming engagements with you and engagements that are in service of our work with you. First, next Tuesday, September 19th, Planning Development Research staff is going to bring an updated work plan for developing the urban growth report that will support counselors in your required growth management decision that's coming up in 2024. This one got bumped over the summer, and we're putting them first. This is one of the largest, biggest, and most impactful decisions that we can make, and so just want to make sure that you have an awareness of that kind of complete plan of how we're going to get you from today to decision. Related to that, on September 29th, I'll be attending the first meeting of our new Urban Growth Report Stakeholder Roundtable. This roundtable is a group of government and industry stakeholders from across the region who will be offering their expertise and perspectives on the content of the 2024 Urban Growth Report. This is in addition to and separate from the regular pathways that we have for the urban growth decision through impact. I'm very excited to meet with this group and be able to integrate their perspectives into recommendations that we provide to you. And then lastly, one non-planning item that I wanted to bring to your attention is the October 3rd work session to consider the draft strategic targets and get more of your thoughts and feedback. While we've been meeting with you individually or in small groups to discuss the project, we're looking forward to having presenting that work that staff have been doing on your behalf and to really dig into that as a group. This work is the result of engagement with local stakeholders and subject matter experts at Metro and across the region, and has really been a cool opportunity for the community to come together and create and refine kind of the vision of where we should be pointing our collective efforts. That's just a little preview for you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Counselors, questions? All right, thank you. Thank you. Counselor communications. Counselor Huang?
Thank you, Madam President. One quick thing for me, we'd like to announce that we're recruiting 3 more members for a core of a committee on racial equity. We've had 3 longtime members that are terming out, including our longtime co-chair, Tristan Penn, who really took CORE to the next level here. But we're looking for 3 new members and prioritizing Clackamas and Washington County. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Counselor Rosenthal.
Thank you. Just a brief note that Councilor Gonzalez and I had the opportunity to attend the Hispanic Chamber Gala last Friday along with Councilor Malan, and it was quite impressive. 650 so people in the convention center. It was a lot of interesting speeches going on for a while. But it was quite a lot of energy.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Counselor Simpson.
Thank you, Council President. Also, I want to add to last Friday, a collection of East County elected officials with Congressman Blumenauer. We all met at Mount Hood Community College to discuss the things that are needed in District 1, primarily in East County, to uplift the folks there. I think the main takeaway was, uplifting people. We can invest as much as we want to in infrastructure, but if we aren't doing those pieces to improve, people's individual lives and quality of life, we aren't moving the needle. So more to come from those conversations, and we'll have more follow-up to come along with that as well. So I'm happy to have any counselor join me as we continue those conversations.
Awesome, thank you. Did you have something? Okay. Anybody else? All right, well, with that, thank you, everybody. It was a big, long meeting, but much appreciated. We delved into a lot of good topics. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for September 19th at 10:30 a.m. Hope to see you there. We are adjourned.